How to Make Science Thrilling from a Jurassic Park Mind, episode 429.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
Today, we're talking with Dr. Ray Ann Havasey. She is Executive Director for the Center for Science Teaching and Learning in New York. Now, Ray Ann, you were also a consultant on the original Jurassic Park movie, and I was looking it up because that's definitely part of my own life, and it's right at 25 years since that happened. I hope that doesn't make both of us feel old.
Oh, my goodness.
I know it. But tell us a little bit about what you did on that project as you worked with Jurassic Park.
Well, there were several things. Number one, I was part of an organization called the Dinosaurs Society, and we were asked to consult on several aspects, the accuracy of the dinosaurs, and then turning it into an educational piece. So actually, after the movie was wrapped, we created an exhibit that toured the world called The Dinosaurs of Jurassic Park. And the reason for that, which was very forward-thinking on the part of Mr. Spielberg, was to say, how do we use these creatures from this fabulous movie and create a way to re-engage people in science? So the exhibit had amber and talked about, was it really possible to pull, an insect from the amber and get its DNA? And so the exhibit toured the world for about 8 years and really engaged people in the whole conversation about science and why is it not only important but really cool and something that we all should know, whether people are geeks like me or not. Why should science be a part of our lives?
Well, as you know, Ray Ann, when people make movies, there's a tension between accuracy and just making a movie. Were there any parts of the movie that maybe didn't line up with science so well?
There were several, especially when it came to some of the, for example, the dinosaur with the frilled. There aren't any dinosaurs that have a frilled neck like that, at least not that we know of, although we're discovering more dinosaurs every day. We had to keep in mind that there's a certain effect that the movie's going out for. And as we were told, don't forget this is not a documentary. So, they're looking for a certain look and a certain visual and a certain dramatic part of the movie. So, it's not 100% accurate, but we all knew that. We all knew that there were aspects of it that were purely for entertainment. And that's why the exhibit went to kind of demythify or to debunk some of the things actually in the movie, because we realized that it's an entertainment piece and that it has aspects of it that may not be accurate.
So I had heard that dinosaurs were extinct before the formation of fossilized tree sap. Is that true or not?
And you see that the whole idea that dinosaurs are extinct is now under question because all of the fossil evidence that we have says, wait a minute, there are lines of dinosaurs that may not have become extinct, but actually may have evolved into modern-day birds, and therefore I tease the kids who come here to the Science Center, and I said, how many of you ate your dinosaur for dinner last night, meaning, your chicken? So what's cool about science, Vicki, and what people and sometimes teachers forget is it changes whenever there's another piece of research, and that's interesting to kids. And that science is a series of investigations. And what we believed about dinosaurs in the 1920s and 30s, we've pretty much spun on its tail and changed based upon the more we discover more fossils and the more evidence. So the idea that some dinosaurs might have actually taken care of their young is something that years ago paleontologists would have said, no way. Dinosaurs were like reptiles, lay their eggs and move on. So when you have an opportunity like a movie like Jurassic Park, it's also an opportunity to say science is cool because we discover new things all the time.
Now, you still are doing things to get kids interested in the coolness of science.
Absolutely.
What have you learned in the last 25 years about, since the original movie, about getting kids truly excited about science, and how do you apply it now to what you're doing at the Center for Science Teaching and Learning in New York?
It's a great question. Most importantly, it's what I call student voice and choice. How much does the teacher or the parent move away from the lecture and into an opportunity for kids to be scientists? And that is to discover, to explore, to engage. I know as an educator myself, as someone who taught for many years, we are so pressed to give the content that we forget that the way in which kids learn content is so critical to their engagement in the subject. If they're engaged in the subject, they academically do better. So I guess in a long way, what I'm saying is sometimes as educators, we forget the role that motivation plays in achievement. And kids get motivated when they're involved in the learning process.
So as you design things to get kids excited about science, what are some best practices you've seen that, because you've got some really cool animatronics you're getting ready to use in an upcoming display. Tell us about those.
Well, the idea behind the exhibit is to talk about adaptations and to use the animatronics and to use project-based learning to have kids make their own conclusions and to learn by trying their own conclusions and seeing if they work. One of the most exciting things educators can do, and when I see teachers doing this, it makes me motivated, is the use of things like project-based learning, where the learning happens as a result of the kids engaging in a project, in something. And that's how this exhibit's being designed. It's being designed so that along the way, kids are making conclusions and doing interactive things that help them understand adaptations. We're not lecturing to them in the exhibit. This is an adaptation. This is why it is. We're saying to them, how did this animal move so that it could do what it did? How did this animal protect itself? How do you think this animal lived? Did it live in a marsh, in a forest?
So you're talking about the evolution of the exhibit in some ways, aren't you?
Perfectly put. We as educators have to move away from the idea that kids learn by being told what to think and what the way that we think the world is. It's funny. It's a very common thing. When I do professional development, one of the first questions I'll ask a group of teachers is, name the top 3 reasons why kids don't learn. And invariably, 90% of the teachers write unengaged, not interested, not motivated. So as an educator, we have to ask ourselves, what could we be, why are we writing that still? And what do we need to do so that we no longer write kids don't learn because they're not engaged? What is the pedagogy? What is the methodology we need to be using so that kids become more engaged? Because if they're more engaged, they're going to learn the content and they're going to do great on those tests that we're also worried about, if that makes sense.
Totally. I'm just fascinated with the fact that you're creating these expensive animatronics that somehow students are going to be able to interact with and learn from in a more interactive way. Because I remember, when I was growing up, we walked through a museum and we read the little placards if we were good little students, and you just walked through. And, I remember we went to the Air and Space Museum one time in D.C. and a kid walked through in like 4 minutes and said he was done. And I'm just like, how can you be done here? But it was interesting to me. I was engaged. The other one wasn't. But
if you design your exhibit so that instead of just giving information on signs, you're asking questions that challenge the kid to stay here and look further. And, the same thing in a classroom when a teacher stands up and begins the class with a probing question versus, today, boys and girls, we're going to discuss cells. I always suggest to teachers when I had my student teachers, how do we start with a really probing question? Well, that's what this exhibit's going to do. It's going to ask the kinds of questions that get kids to discuss what they're looking at with their teacher, with their parent. It's going to challenge them to look further and to use those animatronics or those skeletal dinosaurs to make conclusions.
So could you give us, as we close up, a 30-second pep talk to science teachers to engage their learners?
Project-based learning. I mean, that is, the more we can use that in the classroom, the more engaged learners we create. And the more engaged learners we create, the better they do academically. I mean, I'm not the one just saying that. There's so much research that shows us this.
Okay, Rayanne, my curiosity has got the best of me. If you were a character, one of the scientists in the original Jurassic Park, who do you think you're most like?
I think I'm most like the Malcolm character who talked about crises and chaos and the part that it plays in understanding the world around us.
Oh, chaos theory is so fascinating and incredible, and he really does have some great quotes in the movie. He said that your scientists were so preoccupied with whatever they could do, they didn't stop to see if they should. And ethics are a big part of science, and we're not really going into that today. But I would just encourage all of us listening: are we engaging our students in science? Are we having projects that they're excited to learn about? And then also to check out what Rayanne and all the folks are doing at the Center for Science Teaching and Learning in New York. I'm fascinated with this new way to interact with exhibits and the evolution of the exhibit. That is fantastic. Thanks, Rayanne.
Thank you, Vicki. Have a great one.
Hello, listeners. Would you do a favor? If you like the 10-Minute Teacher podcast, would you go to coolcatteacher.com/iTunes? That will take you to
Thank you
the
for listening
iTunes
to the
store
10-Minute
for the
Teacher
show.
podcast.
And
you can
leave a
download
review
the
or
show
give a
notes
rating.
and
It
see the
really does
archive
help
at
other people find the show.
coolcatteacher.com
Thanks.
/podcast. Never stop learning.